So Richard, what got you into, like, we're always talking like money and in how it works in the economy, and like, you know, what do you think got you so interested in it? You know, your obviously career is accounting is what you focus on. You've talked about like wanting to do your own business and all kinds of stuff, which is really, really cool. But like, what got you into that world of like wanting to know more on how money works and all that? What do you think it is?
I think one of the main things is that I've always been interested in money. Like a story that I have is, you know, when I was young, my dad used to give me and my siblings an allowance.
Yeah.
And I was younger than my other siblings, so I would only get like $1 every week, where they would get like $20 and all that. And one of the things that I learned from a very young age is the importance of money, or at least of saving money. Because one of the things that he always said, or both my parents actually, was, you know, if you want something, you need to save up for it, right? Like, obviously we'll provide for you. But if you want a bag of chips, if you want a video game, you're gonna have to save your money and eventually buy it yourself. So, you know, from a very young age, I understood what the meaning of money was, and the value of saving. And it was also something that interested me from at a very young age. You know, because any other, I think I was like 6 years old when I was in first grade. Any other 6-year-old could be like, yeah, money, whatever, right? But for me, it was like, oh, this is interesting. Like something that genuinely interested me, right? Oh, I have this piece of paper and I can exchange it for a bag of chips, right? And from a very young age, like I said, it's just an interest that I had. And it kind of just, you know, fast forward to today, and I still remember that, you know, and it's still something that interested me, and how now that I'm older, I want to know exactly why I'm able to exchange this piece of paper for you know, something, a good or a service. So that sort of, you know, just brought me to today, where now I'm actually learning how it works and how the economy works, how money works. And I've just been able to retain that interest that I had from a very young age. I would say so. And
you had shared that your mom, they called your mom at school or something?
Yeah. So
sure you're alive. Yeah, you're good.
I would just save up my dollars. You know, every week my dad would give me $1, and we would also play a loteria, and that's basically just like bingo, but just the Mexican version, or Hispanic. I'm not too sure. And sometimes I would win, and my dad would put most of the money into the, you know, because he didn't care, and it was just a couple of dollars. I didn't really have a lot of dollars, but sometimes I would win the game, so I would win the pot, and I had a little bit more dollars. But eventually I got up to like $13 or something like that, and I really enjoyed counting up my money. Right, as a little kid, you'd be like, oh, because it was 13, right? It was $13, 13 $1 bills. And I remember one time I took it to school, and I had it in my little pencil box. That's where I would keep my money, my own little bank, right? And I didn't even know the concept of a bank, right? But that was my little bank, right? And I took it to school, and I don't know, I think I was showing it off to my friends or whatever, and someone might have told on me. And eventually my teacher found out, and she called my mom, right? She was like, oh, Richard brought like money to school. And then like my mom just came to school, and she was like, okay, yeah, I don't remember exactly, right? But she was just like, my mom was like, why did you bring this money? I don't even know. I don't even think she even got mad at me or anything. She was just like, okay, don't take the money to school or whatever. But yeah, it's another thing that I just remember from a very young age, like wanting to save up my money, you know, wanting to have money, and understanding what money was, at least from the most basic sense. And yeah.
And I think it's just so interesting how like your parents, and I had this too, like you talked about if you wanted a bag of chips, you had to buy your own bag of chips. If you wanted, you know, a toy or whatever, no. They gave you the, you know, the basics. It's not like you were, you know, suffering or whatever the case, but they could have bought, they could have bought it for you, and they didn't. And they were teaching you that lesson. You got to save your own money. And man, looking back, it's like, I remember back then, you know, they would, Joe, you have to buy your own thing. And I was like, I didn't like it, but I see why it's so valuable now, because they taught us.
Exactly.
Our parents taught us, like, you gotta save, and then, you know, it hurts if you want to buy it. Like, it hurts because you have to give your own money.
Right.
It's not just like, oh, you buy it.
Exactly.
You know?
You need to be sure of it. Like, do you really want it?
Yeah.
Right? Do you really, really want it?
And I think, like, I'm not a parent yet, but I think that that's one of the things that, like, the most valuable things you can teach your kids. Because I've seen some families that kind of have given everything to their kids. And we talked about, it's not necessarily like an immigrant thing or non-immigrant thing. Like, on both, like, you could, immigrants, non-immigrants, like, this goes across. I think if you give everything to your kids without making them try and work for it, like, you'll lose the value. They won't have a value for how hard it was to get that, you know?
Exactly.
For me, I remember when I got my first car, it was my truck, my F-150. I still have it. My dad went with me to CarMax. We went, and I found it over there, and it was beautiful. I'm like, oh, I want this one. He's like, okay, I'll help you get it. And I said, oh, okay, cool. So I had saved up $1,000. This was like, I was like 17, I think. I saved up $1,000. It was like every penny. I gave it to my dad for the down payment. And, you know, when I gave him that, I pulled money from my piggy banks for all the years. I'm like, some of those dollars and $20 bills are like 15 years old or something. Like, I've been collecting this forever.
Yeah.
But he took it. He took the money from me. And I'm like, why did he take my money? He didn't need the $1,000.
Yeah, for sure.
But he was teaching me that lesson. He took it. We bought the car. And then, you know, he helped me finance it and stuff. Like, he put his name on it. But then he's like, okay, you gotta pay me for the truck at a certain age. And I think it was $8,000. And I was like, oh man, like, I wanted to get rid of the payment so bad that I was like, I emptied almost my account, and I was paying him $1,000 a month till I paid it off in 8 months. And he would write it down on his agenda. He's like, okay, now we can change it to your name. It's yours, this and that. And, well, getting to that is, like, I take care of that truck. You know, that's my first love. I always say, like, I take care of that truck so much, because if it would have been given to me, I think I wouldn't have, I truly don't feel I would have the same care for it. Right. You know? So, you know, the day we have kids, we gotta make them work for it.
Yeah, it's just an allowance, and that's it.
That's it, man. That's it.
Yeah.
But so you got into accounting, you graduated in accounting. You've been like a year, 2 years at
a year and a
now.
half, yeah.
And tell us, like, about the different types of accounting, because when somebody hears accounting, it's like very general, right?
Right. Yeah. So, you know, usually when someone hears the word accountant, they automatically think taxes, right? A tax accountant, which is true. But there's a couple other fields in accounting. One of those being auditing. So, for example, when a public company sells shares of its stock, the investors want to know that what they're buying is actually true, right? Or what they're buying is actually valued, what that price is. So companies need to be audited, which essentially means is that audit firms go in there and sort of test their books to see that, you know, the representation is correct, or at least they're following the rules. And yeah, so they do that for all the public companies. It's like something that they need to get their books audited. And that's one of the fields. Another field is what I do, which is managerial accounting, which is more so like the day-to-day aspect. Just managing the books, closing the books. What this means really is at the end of the month, we close the books to see that everything that in that month was recorded properly. And the fourth one is just working for a corporation, which involves a little bit of everything, but it mostly involves what I do, but it's more just specific to that company, right? Versus what I do is you know, I'm under different clients, so I get to see a little bit of everything, and we're more consultants than than just bookkeepers, I guess you can say.
So it was, and then it's managerial, it's taxes,
auditing, and then just working for a corporation.
Or as as the in-house.
Right, in-house accountant. Right.
Got it. And why'd you choose the one that you're in right now, like the managerial, right? Is it managerial?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So when I went to go interview for this job, for the current one that I'm in, I already had like an offer from another company, but it was more so like a corporation, and I was going to be working in their, I think it was their accounts payable department. So it was super specific, right? Because I was going to do the one where you just work under a corporation, right? So you're their in-house accounting department.
Yeah.
And sometimes these corporations are pretty huge, right? So they have like a specific team just for one account or one aspect of the accounting. So I was going to be working just for accounts payable. And when I went to go interview for this job, the one that I'm in, I was just really interested in the fact that they did a little bit of everything. You kind of get to dip your toes in accounts payable, accounts receivable, literally closing up all the books, right? You're working with like small to mid-sized businesses, but you get to experience everything. Whereas in the other job, I would have just been, working under accounts payable. So I went in there, right? When you already have a job in the back, you walk in there like stress-free, right?
Yeah,
so
confident.
Confident, right? You don't need this job, right? I already have sort of my stuff secured. So I just went in there and I just, I felt like I killed it, and eventually I did get hired. And but I will say this: the pay was less than the other job. So it was a decision that I had to make, right?
Oh, wow.
Do I want to get paid more, or do I want to go do something that I might actually enjoy more? Right?
Wow.
So I had to make that decision, and eventually I chose less pay, and I don't regret it, just because I've learned so much more, and I feel like my knowledge in accounting has gotten so much better than it would have if I would have just worked for a corporation.
It's crazy, like that decision, like some of our decisions in life, good or bad, that like they can take us one way or another. But you were thinking ahead. You were like, let me do the one that's more broad so that I could, get my hands in a lot of different. Do you see yourself like doing like a business, or like where do you wanna take that?
I feel, like you said, you're like thinking ahead, right? Thinking towards the future. A lot of what revolves around accounting will be automated in some sense. So at least knowing how it works and how it should work, the system in itself, it's a good place to be. Just because I think that in the future, accountants are going to be more consultants to actual people versus just running the books, right? And I feel like if I understand how accounting should work, and if I know how to communicate with clients, right? Yeah. Because I don't see in the near future computers being able to communicate with people as efficiently as another human being, right? That human to human aspect won't go away. At least I don't think so. So being able to build that experience and talking to other people is super valuable. And being able to explain accounting concepts to another person and trying to explain that as not in simple terms, but in ways that they could understand, it's also very valuable. So I think that where I'm at right now can provide me with all of those opportunities to learn what I feel is going to be necessary in the future, at least in my field.
Very cool, man. Very cool. So so you obviously you're in it full time in accounting, but aside, we're always talking about like economics and like what's going on, current state of affairs, and like how COVID has affected so many businesses. Right. Some of them grown, it seems, and some of them obviously not around anymore, unfortunately. Actually, I was checking out an article that was saying, talking about taxes. And it was saying that, at the highest levels, California is at a 13.3% 2023 state income tax, and we have like a apparently a mass migration, like leaving to other states who are offering maybe a lower income tax, state income tax, and maybe some other things going on. But like when it comes to taxes, like, have you considered that, like, you know, a different state, or like, you know, have you considered that? Because obviously when you're running a business, you're trying to look at like most efficiency,
Right.
you know, and taxes are obviously something you have to take in as a, hey, this is an expense of doing business,
Right.
you know. But with online business, I'll give you an example. Yesterday I was talking with a client, and they just quit their job at Wells Fargo, or I don't know if it was Wells Fargo, but they just quit their job at a bank, resigned to join their wife in her online business. So like they left a solid paying job at a bank to join their wife on the online business, and because the online business is like picking up. But online business you could do in any state, in any country per se, right?
Yeah.
So like, how do you think taxes are gonna like play into businesses, like especially online? Like that's such a big thing going on right now. Like what do you think on it? I mean,
I think that just everything that's happening with COVID is just going to change everything. You know, especially nowadays with a lot of companies allowing you to work from anywhere. It's super key in allowing people to move somewhere else. Right, remote. So that's just going to, you know, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are leaving California, right? Because they're realizing that, well, we don't have to live here. We can just go live somewhere else and just work from there, right? So, yeah, I would say that that's definitely playing a key role in this mass migration leaving California. As far as the taxes, taxes have always been high in this state, and people have always been fed up with it, right? But they never really had a way out. But now with, you know, this you know, this change in a work environment where companies are letting people go somewhere else to work, that's just allowing them to finally leave, right? Wow. I would say so. Yeah,
like you're about to go remote for some time, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna go work in Germany for a couple of weeks, which is pretty nice. You know, obviously I wouldn't have that opportunity before COVID. So yeah, my CEO, he was literally saying I'm implementing a work from anywhere policy. He sees that. Those were his words, right? And one of the things he also said, which is very interesting, is, you know, times are changing, obviously, and now companies are allowed to hire from anywhere, right? Anywhere in the world, you know, a company can hire somebody else, which is truly a game changer. Yeah. You're not just, you don't really have to only focus in your area to hire somebody. You can hire them from anywhere in the country. Yeah. Just, you know, super revolutionary.
Yeah, I mean, there are people maybe more capable in another state, and now you can actually virtually interview them or whatever the case, bring them on board. And actually happened to me recently where I was talking about expanding to different states, you know, and we got licensed in Nevada. So I was sharing that with my team, and I'm like, so I was joking around. I'm like, so if you guys ever want to go to Nevada, you know, you have a job here still. And one of my team members was like, well, about that, my family is moving to a different state. I mean, to Nevada, to Vegas. So like, I was like, oh shoot, like if I wouldn't have mentioned that, maybe they would have thought like, I'm going to have to find another job over there, whatever the case. But the fact that I threw that out there, like your CEO that's smart of him, man, to say like, this is a work from anywhere type of, you know, because he probably was seeing a lot of people wanting to move from different places. Like you pay a premium to be in a big city. Right. So like, if you can do the same job working, let's say the same state, but in a different city, right? And you pay less rent or less for your property, It's interesting, man, because I also was talking to my uncle the other day, and he was, he's moving to a different state, Idaho, and he was sharing that there's a mass migration in certain states, not out of the state also, but to the suburbs, right? Mm-hmm. To the is it the suburbs? From the cities outward, and because a lot of things that were attractive in a big city, especially like bars and clubs,
they're not there anymore. Yeah, that whole lifestyle,
the nightlife, the lifestyle.
It's insane. Yeah, what's happening.
Yeah,
there's a lot of opportunity too. You just have to, look for it. Yeah, in some sense.
What do you think about like on the real estate side, and I've read some things that talk about people who are obviously if they lost their job, it's going to be very difficult for them to pay rent, but not only rent, if they have a home, a mortgage. Have you checked into what are your thoughts on how that's going to change soon, the real estate side of things?
I mean, right now real estate's really hot, right? There's a pretty huge demand in houses. I do know I've been reading different stuff where they've been saying that the government is gonna sort of defer or allow a lot of these households to defer their payments for a year, and so it's really difficult to know in the near term what's going to happen. But in the long term, I feel, I don't know, it's just my opinion that the housing market might collapse just because it's a lot of cheap money out there, right? Interest rates are super low. People are buying homes with very low interest rates. Houses are very expensive because there's very low interest rates. And eventually it's going to get to a point where it's not sustainable, right? People right now aren't in a good place. Right? They're not making money just because a lot of the economy is closed, and a lot of that pain is being taken away by the government. But eventually all those payments are going to become due, and when they do, that's when the difficulties are going to start coming up. The forbearance where they're allowing I think they said a year, or I heard some of them are going to be due in March. Some on those loans because people have been pushing it up. I actually know several people who are making more money unemployed than at their job than they were making at their job. And so it's an interesting topic, to obviously assistance programs are out there because obviously people need assistance. But when does it go from assistance to dependence and some sort of complacency? For example, I know people who have called their employees back and the employees are actually, I'm making more money unemployed. Let me hold off a little bit. That's, I don't know, it's super counterproductive, and I'm in the belief that nothing is free, right? There's no free lunch. Money, all this free money that people are getting, eventually it's going to be, eventually the dollar is going to be so devalued by all this free money that's being just given away. And things will get more expensive, right? Because these people aren't being productive. They're just receiving money. So they're bidding up the prices of a lot of these goods, right? Because if they were being productive and they were offering something to the pot, right? Then there would be more goods available and the prices wouldn't rise as fast necessarily. But since a lot of these people aren't being productive and not contributing anything to the pot, if anything, the amount of goods out there are getting lower and lower, right? And so this is gonna, just basic supply and demand. Eventually, there'd be a lot more demand, a lot of dollars out there that haven't produced anything, just chasing the same amount of goods. So it's gonna make things a lot more expensive. And we can't feel it right now just because people are scared. People aren't spending their money, right? They're paying off their bills, they're paying off their credit cards. They might be receiving this money, but a lot of what they're doing is just giving it back to the banks, right? Because they're loans. So there's not a lot of money velocity in the economy. But once things sort of stabilize in some sense, things will get more expensive. And they might have X amount of dollars in the bank, but their purchasing power being diminished like by a lot.
You talked about you put the money in the bank, and right. I've heard of different views on this, but like we work to put the money in the bank.
Yeah.
And then like we spend, and we use that, and credit cards are so convenient, and transfers is so convenient. But like, so fractional reserve lending, right? Where you give $1 to the bank and that bank can go and lend that $1 out. I believe it's over 9 times. I don't know the exact number.
It's around there, I would say.
Around 9 times. So Mike works his butt off, puts $1 in the bank, and then the bank can say, okay, with that $1 that he's given us, we can lend Richard, Vanessa, Jessica, we can lend them $1. So they're creating, and they're getting interest on the $1 that they're lending.
And let's say Vanessa goes to the bank and deposits $1. Then they get to lend that 9 times, like it's just an increase of money. But yeah, I'm sorry, continue. No,
so that it's artificial,
right?
Because obviously, the gold standard and all that stuff has been. I mean, if you're not aware of like, I think to be honest with you, I think most people are not aware. I would say that that's the majority, and so ignorance is bliss, or like, but we owe it to our families, our future families, and to ourselves to like know what's going on,
right?
So that we're not caught off guard. I mean, I was 18 when 2008 happened. And so I do remember some of like what was going on, because also at that age we were graduating high school, and then after that 2009 and stuff, like where you saw a lot of things were down. My dad and I got into I was already in the workforce, and then my dad and I opened up a business, I think around like 2010, 11, 9, 10, 11 in that. But like you saw, people were hurting, man. People were hurting. A lot of people that had gotten into certain industries had to pull out. So like back then they said like real estate, like anyone could sell a house,
right?
And insurance, anyone could get insurance, and lending, anyone started lending all of a sudden, but then when that happened, 2008, those people who jumped in there had to like go back to like maybe their original careers and stuff. Like a lot of people left the industries. Now you see it kind of again.
Yeah, it's a repeat.
Yeah. And so where could people learn more about this stuff? Because obviously you do a lot of research, a lot of it. Like, where could people learn more about what banks do with their money? Like, what would you suggest?
One of the first things that I ever read about this subject was, it was not that long ago, maybe it was about 3 or 4 years ago. The book is titled Navigating Big Debt Crisis by Ray Dalio, or The Principles of Navigating Big Debt Crisis by Ray Dalio. And the book is incredibly technical, right? When I read it, I probably only understood 20% of it. Like, it was just, and the reason I understood the 20% of it was because, I majored in accounting, so I understood a lot of the terms that were in there, but I didn't necessarily understand how it worked. But I remember I read it, and I sort of understood what he was saying, right?
Yeah.
But that's what people have to understand, right? When you're learning something new, and especially something so technical, I feel like people get discouraged because they say, oh, I don't understand this, right? And, coming from somebody who studied accounting and studied business, I was even having a difficult time understanding that book, right? But so I have a cool little analogy. When I first started working for my firm, I had the opportunity to go to different networking events and talk to a lot of different successful people. And I talked to a lawyer. I remember I came up to him, and he works for one of my clients. And I just, I was looking for some advice, right? You're always, as someone that's young, they really tell you, if you're young, just go out there and ask a lot of questions, right? Look for advice as much as you can. And I was talking to him and I was like, hey, I'm reading a lot of different business articles. I'm reading anything business related, economics related, and I'm finding that I don't understand a lot of it. And I feel like I'm sort of everywhere. And like, what can I do, to really become more efficient at learning? And one of the things that he told me, and obviously I've never forgotten it, was he said, learning is like walking into a very dark theater where you're walking in there and you're stumbling around and you're trying to find a seat. And you finally sit down and you start watching the movie and you have no idea what's going on. Right? You're like just watching it and you don't know the plot, you don't know what happened before, you don't know what's going to happen. But the more you watch, the more you start understanding what's happening. And eventually you're sitting there and you're watching it for so long that you understand what the plot is and you understand what the movie is about. And obviously what he was trying to say is just study and learn, try to learn as much as you can, and eventually you're going to get to a point where everything's going to start making sense. And I thought that was so powerful, and I've followed his advice, and I've just continued reading anything and everything that I can get my hands on the subject. And up to this point, obviously, I'm no expert at this field, but I understand a lot more than I did, a year ago, 2 years ago. That's just because I've kept learning, right? It's just people get discouraged because they don't understand the subject, and that's fine. You're not supposed to be an expert as soon as you start learning something.
Yeah.
You have to give that first step.
And that's why I think it's so valuable that guys like you and I talk about this. You're still going on there? You're still live on there? I think it's so valuable that guys like you and I talk about these subjects because, there are some books that are so technical that they lose you. And there are some people out there that are so knowledgeable, but they can't capture the audience. You lose people's interest because it's so boring.
So technical.
Technical, right? And not everyone understands all that, and not everyone's in. I remember Vanessa telling me that Vanessa was like, there's a lot of jargon out there, that's what they call it, and like in your industry, like you use these words, but the reality is most people understand what on earth that is, or like, and you use it in certain industries, like we use certain words to make our sound smart maybe, or I don't know why we come up. So like, I would say that like one of the successes that we've had as a business is keeping things simple. Like there are so many technical words out there, and there are so many, especially in like when it comes to investments and insurance and all that stuff, that like you lose people, man.
You do, yeah.
But if you can say, look, this is, and like compare it to like something very, very just practical that everybody, like there's a lot of value in that. So when you're talking about like reading in business and like articles and all that, and initially you won't understand it, but if you keep on it, but then also like people like us who like do understand maybe, let's say, a little bit more because we've been involved in it or we've been reading it, and like the value of being able to share with people and keep it simple, man.
Right.
Because again, there's just a lot of the jargon out there. People trying to sound smart.
Yeah, it's a lot of barriers to entry, right? It's just every field has its own language per se, and a lot of people get discouraged by these terms. But like you said, a lot of these, they're just fancy words. That's all they really are. Yeah. And once you understand what they mean, you're like, okay, this isn't too complicated. I definitely feel that's usually the case, especially in finance. There's so many terms, right? And you hear somebody talk about them, and if you understand the terms and you're following along, but if you don't, you're just like, whoa, what's happening?
It goes over. And I think that maybe that's why there's a lack of knowledge on these topics. How money works, this what we're talking about, like with banks and how they work, and like we've talked about like the Federal Reserve and how, how it even got started and all this stuff. There's a lack of knowledge on it and interest. I think partially because it's made sound so complicated that people are like, let me just look up other stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's not interesting to me. So, the more you can keep things simple for people, I think that's super valuable. So, you recommend Principles?
Yeah.
What's another book maybe that you could throw out? Because I know you do a lot of reading.
Honestly, I do. Okay, so right now I'm also listening to The Ascent of Money by Neil Ferguson, I believe. And again, it's another super technical book. I'm listening to this thing, and half of the time I'm trying to keep up. I need to go back and see what he's saying, or what he's trying to say. But again, I think back to that analogy, right?
Yeah.
As long as I'm listening to this stuff and I'm trying to understand what's happening, even if I'm not able to grasp most of the information, I know that the little information that I do understand, eventually I'll be able to build on it. And because if I would have listened to this book 4 years ago, I would have been like, whoa, what is this? But now, with some of the research and some of the things that I've learned, I probably understand a good 50% of it, which is great, right? Again, it's like step by step. Rome wasn't built in a day. And same with, your knowledge and anything. Just start learning it. It's
just expose yourself.
Yeah,
to it.
Just try to begin to understand something. You don't necessarily have to master it in a day. Just, as long as you're being exposed to those words and to that, the more you hear it, right, the more you'll start, oh, that's what it means.
Yeah. And there's actually I don't know what the technical term is, but basically a fear of the unknown. Mm-hmm. Like, if you don't start exposing yourself to certain things, like, there's a fear behind it. Like, no, I don't want to. Like, for example, debt. They have different views on debt. Dave Ramsey's is big out there, which is like, the little I know about what he has to say, I believe it's a no debt kind of concept. And I was listening to Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. Mm-hmm. He was talking about minimize to no debt. Mm-hmm. He's at a position in his life where he can just buy things cash. Right. And your dad, you were talking about your dad was like, buy the car cash.
Right.
But like, what if you understand the full mechanics of debt and use it to help you grow faster? Right. What are your views on debt? Like, what do you think about it?
I think debt isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? If it's used to...
Sounds bad.
It sounds bad, right? It sounds like
dead.
Yeah,
dead.
Right?
You're dead.
You're right, yeah. It does. It definitely does. I think that if you use your debt efficiently, right? So if you take out a loan and you start a business of some sort, and you're able to create an efficient business that will, provide profits, that's essentially telling you that you are being efficient with the money, right? Because you have enough money to pay everybody, pay yourself, and pay the interest on the loan. So you're essentially using your resources efficiently. Whereas if you take out a loan for something that you don't need, right? Whatever that might be. Let's say you already have a car, but for whatever reason you want another car. In some sense, if it's like a super expensive car, like an $80,000 car, $100,000 car, like, do you really need that car, right? But I mean, if you needed to go to a job, then you're using your money efficiently, right? If you needed to be productive, then that would be used efficiently. But debt in itself isn't a bad thing if you use it efficiently. But if you just use it for leisure or for pleasure, then you're not using the resources efficiently, I would say.
And a lot of people who seem to get hurt or, hear the stories about people who go bankrupt is because they were over leveraged,
right?
Took on too much debt.
A lot of risk too, right? Just because you might think that, oh, I'm making money, right? You're investing and, you're buying different assets that are, giving a return to you on those assets. But eventually, if something happens in the economy and everything starts collapsing and you need to start still, servicing your debts, and you can't, then you need to start selling off those assets, and that's how people go bankrupt, because they're too over leveraged.
So I caught you servicing your debt. What does that mean? Okay, because I don't know. I don't think that's jargon, but
right. That's again
servicing your debt.
Again, it's something so simple.
Yeah,
it's literally just paying the interest.
Okay,
yeah, you did catch me.
No.
Okay. That's a perfect example, right?
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of that jargon, that if you don't know what it means, then you're like, what does that mean? But it's so simple. It's just basically paying off the interest on your debt, right? Like paying off the minimum payment and the interest. That's all it is. Yeah.
So from your view, like, because you're able to see different businesses since you're doing the books and stuff, have you seen some businesses that like are using it, like I imagine you can see how some businesses are using it, some for good, some for bad. Like, do you see some that maybe are over leveraged or using it inappropriately, or?
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, it's all strategic, right?
Yeah.
And I don't like to say that they're using it inappropriately.
Yeah.
I mean, the laws are there, right? They're not doing anything illegal.
Yeah.
It's just that they're being very strategic with their money. And you can take that as good or bad, right? But, the laws are there. If you want to change them, then we'll first send it in Congress. I would change them. I mean, a lot of these companies that I'm involved in, they are, for the most part, they are using their loans efficiently. Because I mean, for the PPP loan, a lot of it, what that loan is not to fire your employees. But also, personally, I see that as counterproductive, because if a company isn't doing well, you gotta let go of your employees. That's just my personal opinion. Just because, again, going back to using your resources efficiently, right? If the government is willing to subsidize a company and allow the company to keep their employees when the company's not being productive with those resources, then they're essentially just wasting resources.
Yeah.
And they're hurting the economy. And you're keeping these the term is the zombie companies alive through these loans.
Wow.
And it's not efficient. It's just not efficient. And in the long run, the economy will hurt, right? The economy will hurt from all of this cheap money. The money, I mean, they like to say it doesn't grow on trees, but it literally does in this case. And it just dilutes the value of the dollar. And that's another topic that I would like to talk about, right? And a lot of people don't realize is the value of the dollar is decreasing every day, right? And a lot of people who have their savings in dollars don't realize that in the near future, they won't be able to buy the same amount of goods or services that they're able to buy today or that they were able to buy yesterday. And that's because of all this money printing, right? Wow. A lot of people ask for government relief, going back to what we were talking about. Mm-hmm. And they want their free lunch, they want their money, but nothing is free. Eventually the price of all these goods and services will rise. And even though the government can keep giving you money, but if whatever it is that you need costs a ridiculous amount of more money, then what good is that free money? Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
I just, I'm all about the free market. If a company needs to fail or should fail, then they should fail.
They need to, and then they can come back. So bankruptcy, mm-hmm. We hear the word bankruptcy. I think most people, myself included, don't know, there are different chapters of bankruptcy, mm-hmm. and then also, because you're bankrupt doesn't mean, it sounds horrible, but there are some businesses that are able to recover from mm-hmm. bankruptcies. And another example, like you just said, if your business model isn't working, call it because of COVID or because maybe it was no longer working, reinvent yourself.
Right.
Maybe you need to exit the industry, maybe you need to exit and then come back in. I actually know a restaurant that really famous, a really, really good food Italian. He's like, guys, I have to close my doors. But the thing is that he has another business it runs differently. It's not sit down. It's more takeout. He left that one open. So maybe he's going to double down on that one.
Smart.
Because in this time, it's takeout, or if you have a big area to sit down, like during COVID. So like, should they fail? You lend that guy money, he's still not getting customers coming to him. Maybe he can try and use that money to marketing and things like that. But the reality is, like, yeah, you're right. You're giving money to a business, like what happened with the airline industry.
Right.
They kept them afloat for I don't know how many months with a subsidy or the money that they gave, but they're still having to lay off thousands of employees.
Yeah.
So what happened to that money? Like, they paid it out to the employees. They right? I mean,
so from what I've read,
and there's some interesting bonuses and all this stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, okay, so one of the things that the airline industry has been doing, and this is not only unique to the airline industry, this is unique to a lot of different corporations. They've been buying back their own stock.
Jeez.
And it's
so what does that mean, Richard? What does it mean when you buy back your own stock? Who's buying back their own stock?
So, it's shady business, to be honest. It's Okay, so essentially what happens is, in a perfect world, if a company was being profitable and had enough money to, on the sidelines, because they were being efficient with their resources, they were, producing things that people want, and they were keeping their expenses low. In other words, using their resources efficiently. Then they would have enough money on the side to buy back their own stock. And all this means really is, let's say there's, 1 million shares outstanding, 1 million shares of any company, and they buy back their own stock. Let's say they buy back 100,000 shares. So now there's only 900,000 outstanding. So, what that does also is that it raises the value of the stock, right? Because now there's less of it out there. Okay, so that's in a perfect world, right? But in a different world, a world much like the one we live in, we have these companies, right, that aren't profitable, first of all. And not only are they not using their own money to buy back their own stock, they're using the money that's given to them by the governments. So for example, the airline industry, right? A lot of these airline companies have been taking in government money that is meant to help them, again, keep employees. They've been using that money to buy back their own stock. And the reason they do that is for a couple of reasons. Why? They want to make the price of their stocks to go up, right? Because a lot of these executives are incentivized through keeping their stock prices
quarterly
up.
Earnings.
Right, quarterly earnings and all that. So they're literally using the government money to pay themselves, right? Because not only do they, have better bonuses when their stocks are worth more, but they also own a lot of those stocks, right? Because they get
stock options,
and all that, right?
Stock options basically just as a CEO or as we're going to pay you a salary, maybe a bonus, and you're going to have some stock in the company.
Right, exactly.
Ownership in the company.
Yeah, so, and then what's sick about all of this really is that the executives will sell their own stock. How a company wants to buy back their own stock, right?
Yeah.
What stock do they buy? Their own. The same executives sell their stock to the company so that the executives can pocket the money. And then it's a win-win situation for everybody, right? Because the stock price goes up. And they're essentially just stealing money from the rest of us. Again,
right, because when you get money from the government,
it's from everybody. And it's through that diluted money that we were talking about, right? Because the government is just printing the money to give it to these corporations. So they're stealing purchasing power from the rest of the U.S. citizens that hold dollars, right? I mean, I wouldn't necessarily just say U.S. citizens because anybody in the world can hold the dollar. So, I mean, they're really just reducing the purchase, but most of the dollars are in the U.S. So they're really just reducing the purchasing power of the dollar, essentially stealing the life savings of many people, right? it's such a sick wealth transfer mechanism. What's happening with these corporations taking in this money that should otherwise, again, I don't agree with keeping these zombie companies alive. So if it were up to me, I wouldn't even give out any loans to these corporations, because if a company goes bankrupt, you know, airplanes don't just disappear. The machinery doesn't just get destroyed. It gets bought up by a different company, and they might just use those resources more efficiently.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. I think of it like Blockbuster and Netflix. Do you remember Blockbuster stuff? Remember there was like, actually yesterday we went to dinner and we saw there was a video store. I'm like, I haven't seen a video store in forever, but it used to be a thing. We used to walk into a store on a Friday night or whatever. Let's rent a video, VHS, so like, or DVD. But Blockbuster didn't get on the bandwagon of online. Netflix comes around, first shipping you the DVDs, and then as a subscription.
Right.
And so they had you on a subscription. They would ship you the DVDs, and then they went 100. I don't know if they still ship you anything. I think it's all 100% streaming.
I think so. Yeah.
Blockbuster didn't get on that bandwagon, and there used to be a lot of them. I remember there was one near the house, and like, you know, but it wasn't efficient when you look at it. Like you would walk into a store. The store is renting let's say a 4,000 square foot building.
Right.
And you look on the walls, and there's movies on the walls. And then you would go up to the wall, and you would see, like, for new releases, it was just a little paper package. The video wasn't even in there. It was just like, literally, they're renting a wall to. Why would you do that if now you can, as everything moved to your phone is the new computer. This is the new, where all the internet. I think people are more, and I don't know the exact percentage, but people are more on their phone than they are on a computer. You know, the average person. So like your phone has become your computer. Texts are opened way more than emails are. Like emails no longer as efficient as they used to be. Now it's like texting. But anyways, they like the airline industry, let's say, needed a revamp, and here comes Netflix and takes them out. Blockbuster didn't get a subsidy.
Exactly.
Because they were no longer a good business model. It worked for a certain time. And I heard some views on it. It's like businesses are meant to be sold. Businesses are meant to be, you know, they have their cycles.
Exactly.
And if they couldn't reinvent themselves on the Netflix, why didn't they buy Netflix? Right? And then they could have gone online. So anyways, it's interesting. I agree with you on what you're saying. And could be a bit controversial because it's like, well, what about all the livelihood of all the employees of Blockbuster?
Yeah.
No one's talking about the Blockbuster employees. There were a lot of employees there.
Yeah.
Netflix comes around and wiped them out. Like, what about all those employees? Well, we're talking about the airline industry. What about all those employees? They need to go to find another company, other skills, and I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but like the resources are now going to be spread out amongst other industries and other things, and that's kind of the natural cycle. It is. You know, you give this airline, you give them money, it's still, like you said, a zombie company. It's not efficient anymore. They got to find a new business model. There's there's a guy named Jesse Itzler. I'm not sure if you heard of him. No. He invented, I think it's called NetJets. Vanessa, is it NetJets?
Yes.
NetJets. He invented NetJets, and basically, apparently it was like private jets. And what they were able to do is, instead of you having to own your own private jet or charter your own private jet, you would use this company and you would fly private and they were able to outperform what first class would do for you, because you would have to wait with all the people. Right. So NetJets became a thing, and like he found a gap, something that could have been improved, and he capitalized on it and became very, very successful. But yeah, it's about people who are willing to like, okay, what's wrong with the airline industry? How can I go in there and change it? With COVID, like travel is a lot less, so like maybe people are traveling more now maybe we can improve the trains. Maybe we can improve like our roads.
Right.
Because a lot of people are road tripping, you know, like maybe we can, you know, tiny homes. Have you seen tiny homes?
No.
Tiny homes are like, it's a house that's like beautiful. Like it could be a beautiful little home, 300 square feet or something like that. Tiny homes are a big thing now because of Airbnbs and stuff. So they'll build these little tiny homes in like hot spots, like near Yosemite, Joshua Tree, stuff like that, where people are going camping, and Lake Tahoe and stuff. And you just rent the room out for a couple of days. And that is actually beating the model of a tenant where like rents for you for a year. Like the Airbnb concept was, you know, I know there's laws on it in some states and cities don't want them, but it's actually they're providing a service that wasn't there. And they're actually more profitable than sometimes having a long-time tenant.
Right.
Just rent it out 20 days out of the month versus, a tenant that's there. So I like the idea of that cycle that you're talking about. And sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
That's good. Yeah, no. And going back to what you were saying about Blockbuster and Netflix, like haven't our lives gotten so much better now that we can just watch at our home, watch Netflix versus having to go to Blockbuster?
That's debatable, man, because you can binge watch now. And
yeah, true. I mean, to each their own, right? Yeah. But I guess the point is, when you let these companies fail and you let and I think that's the idea that you were touching on, and you let these other companies come in and use the resources again more efficiently, it makes everybody's life much better, right? And because new technologies come about and they're better than what they were before. But when you have these companies, for example, the airline industry, right? Like, I don't know, unless you're flying first class, it's a shitty experience, right? And the reason it is, right, it's because, they're not allowed to fail, right? They're always, they're always giving all this free money from the government. They're allowed to be inefficient, so they don't have to try to be efficient. So that's why it's not a great experience. Because
they know they'll be bailed out.
That's the word, right?
Same with banks.
Exactly, right? So they don't have an incentive to fight for people's dollars or be efficient, because they can just waste resources, not be efficient, and still stay in business. Whereas if they would fail, then you would have a lot of these airline industries trying to, compete for customers, and maybe we can get a little bit more leg room, right? Or something.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And that's the problem, essentially.
If a Tesla decided that he wanted to, a Musk decided he wanted to take on the airline industry, he would destroy it. I think. I'll give you an example. Banks. And this is changing. See, airline is interesting because it's like, how do you fly? You need an airplane.
Yeah.
But I'll give you an example with banks. There are online banks now that are way more efficient than the banks that we know today. I'll give you an example. If you go to your average your normal bank right now, there's a line out the door typically.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, definitely.
And you call it, maybe it's because of COVID, but even pre-COVID, I remember having to wait for a long time. And I remember taking a picture one time that the line was so long, I walked in and I walked right out. This was pre-COVID. I was like, it's not efficient. Like, our time is so valuable. We have a finite amount of time in our lives and in our day. And if we're spending 30 minutes waiting just to get a mobile deposit, so I know they push like pictures and like those types of deposits with checks and stuff. But I just see the online banks wiping out eventually the banks that we know today.
Yeah.
Like, because the banks they've been built out. What is their incentive to improve their system? Like, they'll get bailed out again.
Yeah.
They know that they're too big to fail. And we talk about Peter Schiff, economist, that he says they should have let them fail.
Right.
They should not have bailed out the banks. So it's interesting, the idea of failure as somebody who's been in business, it's like, that failure is going to get you closer. We have to fail. It's just, you have to get rejection and told no. So like, if you take that away from me, if you take the failure away from me, you're doing me a disservice, because I know that that's going to make me more efficient. It's going to make me better. So the next time I present to somebody, it's like, I remember the last time I got told no because I did this. Let me improve my presentation, right? Something like that.
Exactly.
I remember I was going to that real quick. I was going through a challenging time financially in the business, and I was paying rent to my dad, and because he owns the property, and I was paying rent. And he said, Mike, I know you're going through a tough time, because we talk about business and stuff a lot. I know you're kind of going through a tough time this month. Don't pay me the rent. He told me, don't pay me the rent this month. And thought about it and wrote, but fast. I said, you know what, Dad? You would be doing me the biggest disservice if you didn't let me feel the pain of cutting you this check right now.
Yeah.
Because I need to feel this pain so that next month I have enough money so that I can cover the rent and expenses and not worry about. And that was a pivotal point, because had I said yes, okay, shoot, next time I go through something difficult, I know my dad's got my back, and he said, I know my dad's got my back to this day, but we kind of have to say no to the help. And I think that it's hard to do. It takes a lot of discipline to be able to say no to the help. But I'll tell you this, I have clients who have straight up told me, Mike, I can't make more money than this amount of income in a year, because I'm going to lose my government assistance. I'm going to lose the...
Wow.
So I'm thinking to myself, that with that mentality, how do you get ahead? Like, with that mentality, you're, it's like, it's actually a hand holding you down to a certain extent. Like, I know people need assistance, but this assistance has become, for some people get out of it, actually holding their head down underwater, because it's like, I can't make more than this. So everything else I'm gonna do is cash, and it's gonna be off the off the grid, you know, under the table. And then it creates that mentality, okay, under the table. Come on, like, so it's interesting, and I would love to see stats on like how many people who get assistance get out of it, how many people who start in Section 8 are able to get out of it, how many people who start in like getting Medi-Cal and you know healthcare assistance get out of it, because you become dependent on it.
Yeah, definitely.
You know?
It's like it incentivizes inefficiency, right? And I don't know. It's just, personally, I don't like big government. You know, I feel that, again, they don't use resources efficiently because they don't have any incentives to do so, right? That's just my personal opinion. And, you know, I do agree with you with a lot of people being really dependent on the government for whatever they're given. And they don't have an incentive to be efficient, right? Because if you didn't have that help, if you didn't have that free lunch, again, nothing is free, then you would look for ways to make money and become efficient, and you would be incentivized to learn new things and so forth. But since you have the government giving you something, then you need to vote for them, right? So they stay in power, and it's sort of a way for them to keep the votes coming in, right? Keep the people dependent on them. And it's, I don't know, it's sad to see.
Yeah. Well, we've been going for over an hour now, but what I would say is, you know, I hope people got some value out of this, and like I hope we kept the concept somewhat, you know, like just relatable and stuff. And I hope we do it again.
Yeah, definitely.
But anything you want to let the world know, man? You know, follow Richard. He's gonna have a social media presence soon. You know, you got a lot of good stuff to say. You have a lot of knowledge in a lot of different things. I think that if you like the idea of sharing it, you know, which I think you do, you gotta have some sort of presence, man. You gotta put yourself out there and start growing, because people need to hear Richard, like what he has to say. A lot of people I'm older than you, but around our age, are not talking about this stuff, man. Mm-hmm. There are some, and we're part of those. But if I think that if you got out there, man, people want to hear what you have to say.
Appreciate that.
That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Sometimes it's just like believing that you're just not ready to talk about these subjects. Like, I just personally feel like there's so much for me to learn, and I don't want to give out misinformation.
Correct.
Right? So, but I totally agree with you. I should. I mean, a lot of these concepts, people should know, right? And especially, people, Hispanics, right? And minorities, they should be more educated in these subjects. And if we can be there to provide it for them, right? Because a lot of it is just specific to, Caucasians, and, they're in that field. And I would say a lot of minorities sort of get discouraged. But if they hear it from somebody who, is from the same background, then they might feel a little bit more encouraged to learn about the subject and read up on it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that what you're talking about of not knowing, let's say, enough in a certain thing, like, people need to check their stuff out. You can't just take Mike's word or Richard's word.
Not at all. Not at all. You need to do your own research.
You need to do your own research, but you could be like a conduit where you could say, hey, I recommend this book, or I recommend this. Mm-hmm. Do your own research on it. Here's my opinion on it. Like, we're not pretending to be, the all-knowing. However, because of what you've studied, your degree and your experience in the business, which I think some people say experience could be even just as valuable as a degree.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Because
I would say more valuable.
I think it's there. I think studies, though, you have to put the experience with the studies. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to combine the two. Yeah. I think it's extremely valuable. But at the same time, I've had that conversation with a couple different people who are like, I'm not ready yet. I haven't mastered this or whatever. We grow with the people. Like, we become better with the people. I remember the first time, let's say, I did a video, and I appreciate you coming out and doing this and being brave and taking my offer, because I threw it out at you, and you're like, yeah, all right. Yeah. You jumped on it, man. So thank you for doing it. But I remember the first video that I did and I put out, and I look back at it. It was the quality of it, I was green in certain, but you know what? You have to start somewhere. Like anything. Exactly. Like the attorney who told you, walk into that room and
start watching the movie.
Yeah.
So. You got to start watching it, and if you don't watch it, then you're not going to know what's happening, right?
Well, I wish you a safe trip, man, to Germany.
Thank you.
Working remote over there.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll do another one when you get back if you want, man.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed doing this. I would really like to do another one.
Cool, man. All right, Rich. Thank you, bud.
No problem.